So I have a problem. Problem is called television. I don't know what it is about TV, but it can get a hold of me like nothing else in my life. Have you ever noticed that? You can walk into a room with a very specific purpose, a determined outcome that you're trying to reach by the time you leave that room, and if this thing's on, that purpose seems to go out the window relatively fast, right? I can walk into a room with the intention of folding laundry, and an hour later, there's not one piece of clothing folded, but I have watched hours of whatever nonsense my children happen to have on in the moment. Right? You've done this too. You've been late for a meeting, right? You're throwing on your shoes. You're looking everywhere for your car keys. You're trying to swallow the Fiber One bar that you just ate for breakfast. You are frantically trying to get out the door, and if the TV's on, well, I'm already late. It's amazing. It can happen without us even noticing that we became distracted, that we got derailed, that our reason took a back seat to something else. It's amazing how you can spend that amount of time doing nothing and not realize that you did nothing. It's crazy. It doesn't even have to be something you like watching. Have you noticed that? I mean, nobody really gets into Judge Judy. But when you're home all day and you're trying to get things done and Judge Judy is on, you end up watching Judge Judy. It's funny how that happens. And sometimes we can get so kind of entranced by it, it requires an outside party, someone like your mom, to come into the room and snap you out of it a little bit. Hey, I asked you to take out the garbage an hour ago. Can you get up and do that, please? Right? It sometimes takes that outside person to shake you loose a little bit. So this morning, I'm going to be your mama. And here's why. Because I think the church has gotten distracted. I think without realizing it, without noticing it, something has taken our attention from our intended purpose. I think something has derailed us, and we've become transfixed on that thing to the dire cost of something greater. And we don't even notice it because it happens kind of under the surface. So I want to draw your attention to that this morning. Now, if you're in the room and you aren't a Christian, you're just checking out church for the first time or the first time in a long time, I have good news for you. We are going to address a question that has been rattling around in your brain for a very long time. In fact, even if you're a Christian, I'm going to guess you have wrestled with this question over and over again. It's just sometimes Christians are afraid to admit it. But here's the question. Why does a good God allow evil things to exist in the world? Why does a good God, an all-powerful, all-loving, good God, allow evil things like starving children and rape and murder and all of that to happen in the world? Why doesn't he just snap his fingers and make it all go away? Like I said, you could be a Christian for 25 years, and that's been the question that's perplexed you the most. And it's right in the middle of that question that we find the thing I believe is our television, the thing that has distracted us and derailed us from our intended purpose, and it's this thing called evil. I believe that evil has gotten our attention so much so that we've forgotten why God put us here in the first place. And here's what I mean by that. I think there's no shortage of things happening in our planet and in your life that are wrong. Christian or not, you can agree with me that this world is broken. There's a problem. You may not have your finger on what that problem is, but you understand there is a problem. And here's what happens for a lot of us. We end up sitting down, and without realizing it, we get transfixed on all that is wrong. And we sit and we stop growing. We stop focusing on good because we're so taken with watching the evil grow around us. And like I said, just like with television, it's a subtle thing that I don't even know we know is happening. But you and I live in this world now where there's a lot of questions. Questions about our future, questions about rights and freedom, what's next, what's coming. And it would be really easy to look all around us and go, the world is falling apart. Let's just watch it happen. And it's almost like so many Christians have gotten comfortable with, I'm just going to wait till the show's over. I'm just going to wait till the show's over. As if we're entertained by it in some weird, twisted way. I want to show you what I mean, because we're going to continue to look at these parables that Jesus used to explain what the kingdom is like. Again, a parable is a story or a metaphor that Jesus would use to explain a really big concept in a very practical way so that we might understand it some. And last week we looked at when Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, and that was a thing. Today, he's going to say the kingdom of heaven is like wheat, which seems weird. And Jesus uses all kinds of agriculture metaphors like this because the people that he's talking to in the flesh are very into agriculture as kind of their way of life. But it'll be important this morning that you understand, instead of Jesus using a single thing as his object lesson today, like he did last week with a mustard seed, today it's more of a situation. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that make up this teaching that he's doing. But what's great about this parable is that just a few verses after he delivers it, he explains it word for word to his disciples. So we're going to do something a little bit different this morning, and we're going to kind of read two passages at the same time. So we're going to read Jesus saying the parable, and then we're going to jump down to where he explains that component of it. And we're going to walk our way through, and I think we're going to see some things that maybe we didn't expect to see when we've read this through and through. So if you have a Bible with you, Matthew chapter 13 this morning, or if you want to pull it up on a phone or whatever, Matthew chapter 13. Now there are some of you that are sitting here going, I am so thankful that he has some cartoons on today, so I don't have to be bored for the next 30 minutes. You are welcome. Matthew chapter 13, starting in verse 24, says, Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. Now, he explains what each of these parts are if you jump down to verse 37. The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man, which is a title Jesus used for himself. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one. Now again, this is an entire situation that includes a lot of farming and seeds and growing and all of that kind of stuff. And so we've got to kind of make our way through this. But the reason Jesus uses such a complex metaphor is because the kingdom is complex. And what he's trying to illustrate here is this kind of cosmic battle between good and evil. And he's going to do that in a very practical way using farmers. And so he begins by comparing and contrasting sort of this good farmer with this bad farmer. The good farmer is the one who throws out the wheat that's going to grow up and be useful. Useful for those that eat it, useful for those that turn it into, I don't know, whatever else you might turn wheat into. But it's good, and it grows, and it's healthy. But there's also this bad farmer who in the middle of the night, and this is interesting, sneaks onto someone else's property and plants weeds. Now, I know we don't like talking about the evil one and how smart he is, but he's brilliant. Because what the tactic here is, instead of going in with a rototiller and destroying their crops, I'm going to stealthily sneak in among them and plant weeds. And those weeds will grow up and choke out the plants and he won't even know where it came from. It's really an amazing strategy. So there's this good farmer and there's this bad farmer. There's also this good seed and the bad seed. And Jesus compares these two. One grows up to be wheat, one grows up to be weeds. And we know there's good in wheat and weeds are bad. You don't even have to be a farmer to understand that. You have dandelions all over your yard right now, right? So you understand the idea of a weed. But there's also this comparison between a kingdom and what I want to call an empire. Now, those two might sound very similar to you, but for me, the kingdom and the empire are two different things. The kingdom has a king, a good king, that invites others in to be a part of that kingdom. This is the kingdom of heaven. The empire, or any empire that you've known in history, is all about conquest and defeat and power. And empires have emperors. And so, in my mind, one of the ways to distinguish these two is God is the king of a kingdom, Satan is the emperor of an empire. Because an empire goes out and takes over other people's land, right? And the bad farmer has snuck onto the good farmer's land and is trying to take over it. So, kingdom versus empire, and then it's all wrapped up in this wheat versus weeds. Now, here's what's interesting about the analogy that Jesus uses. The wheat that he's probably referring to and that everyone would have known in that time is called darnel. And what's interesting about this wheat and the weeds is that they look identical. They look exactly the same as they're growing up through the ground and up. It's not until they're fully mature or it's time for harvest that you can tell the difference between the two. And that's going to be an important part of what Jesus is about to teach, that the weeds and the wheat are incredibly difficult to differentiate. They look almost identical. And it's not until they begin to bear fruit that you can see the difference. And so you go, well, how do we tell the difference then? How are we supposed to know who's good, who's bad, and in between? Well, 1 John 3:10 says this. John wrote this down for us. I'm so thankful. He says, this is how you know who the children of God are and who the children of the devil are. Anyone who does not do what is right is not God's child, nor is anyone who does not love their brother or sister. That's a pretty simple definition. But isn't it interesting that what John is writing down is you need to look at the fruit that people bear. That's how you will know what kind of seed they are. And that's baked into the analogy that Jesus is sharing. You will know the difference between kingdom citizens and people of the empire by the fruit that they bear. And so then, at another part, John in his gospel, his account of Christ's life and teaching, he wrote this in chapter 8, verse 42. You belong to your father, the devil. Or Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me, for I have come from God. So right there, pause. A child of heaven or a citizen of the kingdom loves Jesus. Period. That's kind of what he says. You would love me, for I have come from God. I have not come on my own. God sent me. Why is my language not clear to you? Because you are unable to hear what I say. You belong to your father, the devil. And you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and a father of lies. This is interesting. So you begin to be able to distinguish by the fruit of their life. People that are liars, you know probably where they come from. People who don't love Jesus, we begin to see how they're growing out from the seed that they began in, right? You can differentiate them by their fruit, by how they grow. But as they're growing, according to Jesus, it's really difficult to tell the difference. But they are different. Because just one chapter ago, Matthew 12:30, Jesus said, whoever is not with me is against me. And whoever does not gather with me scatters. Now there are people that want to say, well, I don't really want to be wheat. And I'm too nice of a person to be weed, so I'm something else. Jesus says, no, there's one or the other. In this field, only two things grow, wheat or weeds. And you kind of have to make a decision about which you are, where you belong, whose you are. Because there's one or the other. This is a dichotomy. And so Jesus begins to explain this more in Matthew 13. If you go back to Matthew 13, starting in verse 26, he says, "When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, 'Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?' 'An enemy did this,' he replied. The servants asked him, 'Do you want us to go and pull them up?' 'No. Because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn.'" Now Jesus explains this if you jump down to verse 39. "And the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." In this is the big question. The people that work on the farm come up to the farmer and go, "Hey, did you mess up? Because there's weeds out in the wheat field." That is another way of asking, why do you allow evil to exist? Why did this happen? How did this happen? Did you forget? Did you drop the ball? Did you not know this would happen? Did you get tricked? How do you allow evil to exist in this world if you are so good? That's the question that's being asked. And what's interesting is Jesus' answer. The wheat. I let the weeds grow, and I allow the evil to be present for the sake of the wheat, so that the wheat can grow to full maturity, so that all of the things growing in the field have an opportunity to produce fruit and reveal where they are. It's for the wheat. Now, this is a head scratcher, because any good farmhand would go, "Well, we don't want weeds." What we see in the answer is the wisdom, knowledge, and skill of the farmer. The farmer who knows better than the best farmhand. The farmer who knows better than any plant. Because if wheat could talk and think, they might say, "Well, you need to get these weeds out of here. They're choking us out." And the farmer goes, "No, because if I pulled that weed, I might pull you too. Because it's not time." When it comes to agriculture, timing is everything. And in this case, the timing that God, the farmer, is preoccupied with is the growth of the wheat. That's the primary drive, main focus for the farmer. He's almost indifferent to the weeds, because all he wants is for his wheat to grow up strong and to full maturity, so that when harvest time comes, it's a great harvest. And if the farmer is more concerned with the good wheat growing in the field than the bad weeds growing in the field, then maybe that's how you and I should be too. I think part of what Jesus is teaching us is that we need to worry less about their bad and more about our good. We need to worry less about their bad and worry more about our good. Because the farmhands are all just totally preoccupied by the evil around them, right? All they can think about is the weeds, and the farmer's going, no. Don't even worry about that now. We'll take care of that later, when it's harvest time. We need the wheat to grow. That's the goal. That's why I planted the wheat where it is, so that it could grow up into full maturity. You could argue that, is this farmer irresponsible? No, this farmer knows what's best, understands that underneath the surface, the roots of both plants are all intertwined. That there is this element of simultaneous growth. That as the weeds are growing, as the evil's increasing, the kingdom grows and the kingdom increases. And they happen right alongside of each other. Jesus says, we're going to wait until it's time. I never thought about it that way, though. But the reason God allows evil to exist is me and you. And the person next to you that you might assume is a weed, but as they mature and grow, you see they're weak. And God gives them the time and the opportunity to reveal that. You know, it's interesting, Jesus is saying the same teaching in Mark, another account of his life, and in chapter 4, verse 29, he puts it this way: as soon as the grain is ripe, he puts the sickle to it, because the harvest has come. And I love that because it reminds me that the task of weeding is not mine. It's his. I don't carry a sickle. He does. You know what my job is? As wheat, grow. Become who he planted me to be. And then Paul wrote about this similarly in 1 Corinthians 4:5. He said, therefore, judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait until the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness and will expose the motives of the heart. At that time, each will receive their praise from God. This is hard because, again, we've become very distracted by the weeds. And we're consumed by all that's happening around us and to us and the uncertainty. And you know what happens? We live fearfully and we live frantically and we live ferociously. And what I mean by that is sometimes we want to assume that it is our job to eliminate evil in the world. No, that is the job of the harvesters at the end. Your job, wheat, is to grow. Become who God planted you to be. It's interesting that right at the end, when Jesus is talking about the end of the age and the harvest time, do you know what he says? He says the angels will come and they will weed out of the kingdom. Do you know what that means? The kingdom is here and now. It's then and later, but it's also here and now, because the harvesters are going to come and remove the weeds from the kingdom. They're going to weed it out. That means that you and I have a responsibility here and now to live as citizens of the kingdom. We don't get to be the kind of wheat that is planted and goes, all right, I'm just going to wait until the show's over, when all the wheat's removed, and then I'll start growing. But that's not what Jesus says. No, they grow next to each other. And at the end, the weeds will be removed. So don't worry about the weeds. Worry about the wheat, because that's what the farmer does. Worry less about their bad and more about your good. You see why I'm saying the church has become distracted is because we've become proficient at pointing the finger at everyone else at the cost of becoming who God told us to be. It's just like my children, who, when they get in trouble as a group, they say, well, he started it. He did it. Look at him. And they don't want to admit that they have any fault in it at all. So don't worry so much about their bad. That's what I tell my kids all the time. Don't worry about what he's doing wrong. You just behave how you're supposed to behave, and you will be all good. Jesus sums this all up with the goal in verse 43. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears, let them hear. It's interesting to me that in this parable, Jesus seems to focus very little on eliminating evil, because that has an appointed time, the harvest time. In this moment, in this time, in our time, our goal should be outgrowing the evil, outshining it. And so this shifts to being about the sun, right? Shine like the sun. And because light is the only way to rid a room of darkness. Have you ever noticed that? You don't get to just gather up darkness in your arms and pull it out of the space. The only way to eliminate darkness is for the light to get brighter. And the light is not, it doesn't even need to worry about the darkness because it takes care of itself as it becomes brighter. And so what I think Jesus is calling you and I to do as custodians of the kingdom is to grow like crazy to distract the world from evil. Right? What's happened is the church has become distracted by evil. And we just think it's our job to point out to everyone else how evil and decrepit and falling apart the world is. And instead, what we should be doing is growing at such a rate and being so much like Jesus and living so much like the kingdom is here and now that the world sits back and goes, what is happening here? It's just like my English garden at home. Are you impressed I have an English garden? I don't even know what that means. But somebody planted one before we moved in. You know what grows best in my English garden? Weeds. So much of what Jesus taught using these parables would have been lost on me because I don't have a green thumb anywhere. And so there's all kinds of weeds. But what's amazing is there are also these incredibly beautiful flowers that without us having to put in any work, grow up, and they grow up taller than the weeds. And every time we bring somebody into our backyard, they see the English garden, they go, wow, that is beautiful. No one's ever come back and gone, look at all the weeds. They may say that under their breath, I don't know. But at least to my face, they don't make a big deal about the weeds because they're distracted by the beautiful flowers that have grown up taller. So what if the kingdom is less about worrying about all that's wrong and just focuses on, in the kingdom, it'll be good. And this is who we're going to be. And we're going to outshine all the darkness. We're going to outgrow all the weeds. And everybody will be looking at us. Because he is the king. And we're the citizens. You see, what we need to do is shift our focus from all of the evil around us to our Father before us. Shift our focus from all of the evil around us to our Father before us. Because he's bigger than all of that. He's the farmer that understands how all of this works. He's the farmer that understands the precise moment that everything is ripe to its fullest maturity and it's time to harvest. So we trust him, and our focus stays on him in the midst of the craziness that is the United States of America today. With all that we're questioning and wrestling with come November, we shouldn't be looking around at the encroaching evil. We should not be afraid of all that we think is threatening us, because our focus is on the Father. And he's the one eternal constant. All of this other mess is going to move and shift and change. But your Father in heaven is the one constant you have. So worry less about their bad and more about your good. Spend more time developing and growing in your relationship with Jesus than you do spending time pointing out all that's wrong with everybody on television and everybody in your neighborhood and everybody in your office and everybody in your family. Just go, you know what? Up to you, God. I'm just going to focus on growing in my likeness to you. So here's what this means on a very practical level, because this is one of those messages you could sit here and, yes, I'm with you and I agree, and it sounds like power of positive thinking and yay. But I think there's really practical implications here. One, this is going to affect your confidence, what you're confident in. So the question is, who do you trust with what's happening around you? I've talked to countless people. I don't like politics. I don't really care. This is not a political message, okay? But I've talked to people that are scared to death because of the stuff that's happening around them. And the world's ending, and we've got to be ready, and all of that. And God, I think, is going, I know when the harvest is. All you need to do is grow. Don't worry about them. I'll take care of that. You grow. Don't look around you. I think it means when it comes to our confidence, who do you trust with the things that are happening to you? Because there's a difference, right, of all the stuff happening around that you see on TV or you read in the newspaper, and then there are the things that happen to you, like losing your job, or going through a divorce, or having a feud with your neighbor because of the property line, or whatever it is that you're going through, right? Those things happen directly to you. And the question you and I have to wrestle with, if we are supposed to worry less about their bad, more about our good, is your confidence in God, or is it in something else? And what about what's best for you? Do you trust Him? Because again, the farmhands and the plants themselves would have probably argued the best thing for the wheat is to get rid of the weeds. But the farmer goes, no, 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 no. You don't understand fully what's going on here. I know what's best for the wheat. Let the weeds grow. Do you trust Him with that? The second thing this is going to affect, if it's not your confidence, it's going to be your consideration. So yes, we're doing all C's. Consideration, here's what I mean this. How you view someone else, how you consider other people. That's important because you have to live conscious of the fact that you and the weeds, if you're a weed, look exactly the same. And it won't be until harvest time that we know for sure, which is which. So the way you consider someone is affected by this reality. You know the old hymn, Amazing Grace. It's written by a guy named John Newton, not Isaac Newton. But John Newton wrote this hymn that we have been singing for centuries. And it's an incredible piece of work, but he actually was talking about something entirely different, and it's my favorite quote from him, aside from all the verses of Amazing Grace. Someone asked him, what's going to surprise you in heaven? And this was his response, quote, the three greatest wonders of heaven will be these. The first will be to see many people there whom I didn't expect to see. The second will be not to find many churchgoers whom I did expect to see. And the third and greatest of all will be to find myself there, knowing what I know of the wickedness of my own heart. Thank you, Mr. Newton, for illustrating precisely why this is so important. Because remember the thief on the cross next to Jesus? For all intents and purposes, this was a weed. But in that last split second when it began to bloom and he turns to Jesus and says, remember me, what does Jesus say? Today you will be with me in paradise. You, sir, are wheat. So be careful how you consider other people, because you might be living next door to them for all of eternity. It'll affect your confidence, your consideration, and your concentration. What you focus on. The question you have to wrestle with is, am I honoring God with this post, with this thought, with this conversation, or am I putting the spotlight on something else? Second is, when it comes to concentration, am I doing this to become more like Jesus or just get a platform? And finally, am I concentrating on growing good? Or am I transfixed and distracted by something else? You see, you and I need to worry less about their bad and worry more about our good. Because it's when we get distracted that we really begin to have trouble. It reminds me of Peter. Remember when Peter was in the boat and Jesus came walking by on the water? And they call him out and he says, well, go ahead, come on. Come on out here. And Peter, we don't think about this. Peter actually walked on water. Peter did. He takes a step out and he stays up top. And another step and he stays up top. Peter's the only other person in all of history to walk on water. And the entire time he's staying up, his eyes are transfixed on Jesus. But there's this sentence that comes next that talks about how Peter became distracted by the waves around him. And when he became distracted by the waves around him, down he goes. So you need to worry less about their bad and worry more about your good. And focus your attention and your energy and everything that you are on him. And his promise is, I will take care of it all when the time is right. But in the meantime, you just need to grow, because that's why I'm letting all of this happen anyway. So this is what I want to challenge you to do this week. It's been a while since I've given you a very specific challenge. This is going to be a doozy. I'm going to challenge you for the next 7 days to turn the noise off, to turn off all the things that distract you. So for some of you, this is, I'm going to give up CNN and Fox News for the next week. I am going to use my paper to get a fire in the backyard started instead of reading it. I'm going to eliminate the things around me that are distracting me from the reason God planted me here on this block, in this office, in this family. I'm going to get all of that noise that's making me live a fearful, frantic, and ferocious life out. For some of you, that's going to mean sign out of your Facebook account, sign out of your Twitter account, be done for a while so that your attention can be totally focused on him. The only way I ever get laundry folded is if I turn the television off. And you and I have a lot of laundry to fold when it comes to our relationship with Jesus. And I'm not saying all TV and internet is bad. Of course not. But I'm saying sometimes the noise that is to the sides of us is distracting us from the thing that's right in front of us, namely our Father and what he's called us to do. Now, I know I challenged you maybe to turn off social media, and if that's you, this next part is not for you. But I would challenge you in the next week to outgrow the noise in this way. Spend time every day in Scripture reading about Jesus and the kingdom and how he's growing it. And when God gives you a little something that gives you some energy and some encouragement, I want you to go on the internet and post it and use the hashtag #ICTimeWith. I spent time with God today, and this is a way that he encouraged me about how he is winning. Because I don't know if you knew this or not, but the last page of this book says Jesus wins. So what if, just like my English garden, you and I just started making more noise than everybody else, so that the world got distracted by the good in the kingdom? Not how loud we can be about the bad outside of the kingdom, but how good the kingdom is. And here's how I'm going to participate, just to help you along. I'm going to use the hashtag #ICKingdomWin. And what I mean by that is anytime I see, I'll keep reading the paper, and every time I see a place where I feel like the kingdom won, or I hear a story from among us where the kingdom won, or there's a story that comes up on BuzzFeed where I don't know if anything about the kingdom comes up on BuzzFeed, but anything good that reminds me that Jesus is winning and the wheat can grow bigger, taller, louder, more vibrant than the weeds, I'm going to share that so that we can do this together. Because remember, the kingdom is growing now. Now, I'm going to let you go in a minute, but there are people sitting in this room right now going, this sounds like burying your head in the sand. This sounds like the power of positive thinking and just pretending that everything is sunshine and rainbows. That's not what I'm saying at all, because there is a profound difference between burying your head in the sand and fertilizing the ground around you. And so I'm calling you to get so focused on fertilizing the soil that maybe you don't worry about that other stuff for a little bit. What I'm challenging you to is be wheat and grow the kingdom. Be wheat. Don't worry about the weeds for a while. Just be wheat and grow the kingdom. Let's pray. Father, we are so easily intimidated and frightened and ultimately distracted. And in some ways, I wonder if you're saying, if you just get focused on growing, we'd get to the harvest sooner. And I'd take care of evil then. But you're so distracted by the evil, you're not growing. So this is what I want to give you an opportunity to do today. If you can just keep your eyes closed and head bowed. I just want to give you a minute or so. Because you might be here this morning and you need to repent. And that's a very churchy word. Here's what it means. It's you recognizing that you are going in a direction opposite from God. And repentance is the moment where you decide to turn and go back to God. And for some of you as Christians, you may need to repent because you've been distracted and you've neglected your purpose. And for some of you, you're realizing, well, I'm a weed. The good news is Jesus did all the hard stuff to make it possible for you to become wheat in a heartbeat. All you got to do is say you're in. So I want to give you a minute to talk to God. Let him know what you're thinking and maybe listen to what he might lay on your heart. Father, in some ways, the church has gotten the attention of the world for very wrong reasons. Because we've been more determined to be loud and point out the evil than we have been focused on just becoming like you and being like you and making the kingdom real here and now. It's no wonder you gave us a very simple prayer with a very focused point. And so today we are sorry and we are committed to growing your kingdom in our hearts, in our church, in our town, in our county, in our region. We'll be wheat. And we'll leave the weeds up to you. Amen. Here's how I'd love to send you off today. You know the Lord's Prayer. Even if you've never gone to church before, you probably know the Lord's Prayer. And we're 2 weeks into this series, and we're talking about the kingdom, and there's this part in the Lord's Prayer where it talks about the kingdom. And so I'm going to invite you to stand with me today. And we don't do this often, but we're going to read this prayer or recite this prayer together out loud. And what this is going to signify is our commitment to growing the kingdom. And in some ways, our turning away from the constant distraction that we've been duped by in some ways. And what I'm going to ask you to do is pray this prayer. Don't just recite it. Don't just read it off the screen. But pray this. So will you pray with me? Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. May God's kingdom come in your life, in your family, and in your world this week. Have a great 7 days. We'll see you next time.